All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. It is June 2nd, Tuesday, and this is the sales meeting for the West Cobb branch of Maximum One Greater Atlanta. So I am going to turn it over to either Brenda or Jeanne to go ahead and get us started.
You want to, Jeanne? You go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you're able to join us, and I hope everybody is doing well and your business is going well. And as we're open back up, I hope everybody is able to get out more. I know Dana, we're trying to figure out when to go back to the office because I know a lot of our vendors really want to meet us at the office. They want to meet you face to face, but it'll just depend on I guess we'll just play it month to month. But let's get started. Who wants to go first, Jay or Amee? Okay, Amee, you want to go? You want to go first?
You're muted, Amee.
Ah, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, still trying to figure out Zoom after 2 months of it, right? I don't have a lot to give you guys today. Just going to give you a kind of an overview of the changes that we have going on right now. The social distancing order is technically still in place. You can now have groups of up to 25. My perception of this is just a way for them to keep mass groups, like starting back to the MLB, concerts, all of that from gathering. So right now we're limited to 25 in a group, which is, still a lot of people in a group. What we have done in our office at this point, because they have lifted it to where we can have 25 in a group, we are still limiting extra people from coming in, just because I don't want to have super big crowds, because sometimes we have at closings 8 or 10 extra people that come, believe it or not. So what we're doing is signing parties and realtors and agents to the closing table. So we're kind of getting back, we're scheduling them at the same time now, unless your clients ask us to separate them. If they ask us to separate them, I still have some clients that are coming in end of June that have some health issues that have already asked us to close outside. We're still happy to do that. You just have to let me know in advance so that we can schedule it accordingly, especially with funding docs and all of that. So I want to just kind of give you a heads up to what we're doing on that end of it. So please feel free to come back to the closing table. Feel free to come into closing and see us. Come see your clients, walk them through the process. They want you there. Let's be honest. They would prefer that you be there. We would prefer that you be there. The only issue that we're having right now is after Memorial Day, we kind of got into a bottleneck situation with the lenders, trying to get everything out, because with Memorial Day week and then the week after Memorial Day, when everybody takes that time off, a lot of times buyers are not getting to the lenders what they need to process the files and get them finalized. So we've had some delays in getting closings to the table because we can't get loan packages because they can't get what they need from the borrowers. So that's been a little bit of an issue, but that's an issue every year at Memorial Day. Hitting into the summer swing, I'm hearing most of my realtors say that they're picking up drastically. I think that our July 1 is really going to be our normal April 1 kind of month. You guys are killing it out there in the market, doing a great job getting everything out there, making sure that everything is getting done and getting us your information. The only thing that I would ask is that if you're not going to come to closing, make sure that we have everything. We're having some significant issue in trying to get, for example, termite letters that we've been asking for, commissions. Commission agreements. I'm having a lot of issue trying to get those in. And I think it's just, we've gotten out of the habit of making sure that's at the table because we're not coming. But there are things like repair receipts. If your clients are supposed to be bringing us repair receipts, things we might not know about. We had one last Friday. I didn't even have the repair invoice, the repair amendment, and there was a change in closing costs, and somehow I nor the lender had gotten it. So just please make sure that you're getting us any amendments, any changes, commission agreements, any extras. Go on and get those to us up front. The sooner we have those, the better off we all are. And then as quickly as you can get us your disbursement authorization, if you want us to cut your check at the table, go ahead and do that as well, because we had a couple of you come in to pick up checks and we're like, oh, you're supposed to have a DA, but we never had gotten it. So if you could just make sure that we're getting those in a timely manner as well, that would be great. Just want to set out to you guys that we are starting very quickly to get into tax season. So we are coming upon that very, very quickly and very fast. So I just want to remind you that tax season is coming up and that we're going to have lots going on with that. So keep in mind when you're doing your estimates, whether or not they're still paying taxes or whether or not they're going to be getting a credit back for what they've paid. The final thing I want to talk to you about is just the HOA letters. In your GAR contract, and Dana, you and I can talk about this. You feel free to give your thoughts on this too. In your GAR contract, it says that the seller is responsible for the letter and any fees associated with getting us the closing letter for the transaction. So we've had some of you guys get really creative, which is great, but it has to be in your contract because it's caused a couple of issues between the buyers and sellers with kind of bickering back and forth about who's supposed to pay what. Those letters typically run between $200 and $250. Now, I am totally on board with you that all of those fees that are in that letter are not seller fees. I agree with you. But the way that it's written is that whatever cost associated with to get a clearance letter is the seller's responsibility. A lot of times what they're putting in there in that letter for clearance is a transfer tax fee. And I've talked to a number of different attorneys and we've all kind of went back and forth on the listserv on this. They're getting a lot of pushback. I'm getting a lot of pushback on it as well. But the letter specifically says that it is any fee associated with getting the letter to the closing table. Because they made that generalization, it's very hard for us to determine, does that include, for example, All-in-One always charges that transfer fee when they give the letter? So there may only be $10 and then another fee for it that is associated with getting the actual letter to us, but there's other fees that they charge in order to process the letter. So if you know there are other fees that are associated with that and you want to make sure that your seller isn't paying those extra fees, because it also says that we can't reimburse at the table for fees prepaid. So if you look on that community association disclosure, we can't reimburse for fees prepaid. The problem with that is the transfer fee is not a seller cost typically. It is a buyer cost, but they charge it in order to give us the letter. So if that's an issue for you or your client, do a special stipulation for it so that we know how you want us to do it. Because again, we told you on the beginning that they made all these changes to the community association disclosure and there's still problems with it. I think there's always going to be problems with the community association disclosure as long as we have one that allows for there to be some subjectivity to how there's an interpretation on it. So I just want you to be really careful with that. We've had a couple of you say, well, the seller's going to pay for the letter and this fee and the buyer's going to pay the balance on their credit card. And that's great if you have it special stipped, because I just called a buyer on one yesterday and the realtor said, we didn't agree to that. And it's the seller's responsibility to get the letter and we're not fronting that money. And we're not reimbursing because that's what the community association disclosure says. So I just want you to be aware of that. Dana, do you have any comments on that? Because I know that you've seen some of this too.
Just the same thing that, there's a lot of confusion on that because it says if that fee was disclosed, the seller doesn't have to pay it. But there's
Right.
that other paragraph that you're talking about that does specifically say the seller is responsible for getting that closing letter and all fees that are associated with that. So it is very confusing and
Yes.
the agents just need to specify it between the buyer and the seller. But Amee, I have a question because this is what I'm getting a lot. What fees go where if the community association disclosure exhibit is not attached to the contract, but the property does belong to an HOA?
So I'm having a lot of problems with this actually. We're getting a lot of contracts that don't have a community association disclosure. And quite frankly, this now falls on, in my opinion, the buyer. And because here's why. It falls on the seller to get us a letter because that's part of the title clearance. So we would charge the seller and make the seller get us the letter like we've always done. Where it becomes a problem is what fees are they supposed to pay? And then we have to go back to the HOA and find out, is this a seller fee? Is this a buyer fee, to try to figure it out because we don't sometimes know how they're doing their fees. So we have to ask them that. It gets into an argument or battle every single time. And here's what I would say to you is if there's not a community, we had one title came back a couple weeks ago and we called the realtors on it and let the realtors know, hey guys, there's no community association disclosure. Title just came back and there's a homeowners association. Is it active or is it not? And the seller said, yeah, it's active. And there was never a community association disclosure signed. And when I talked to the listing agent about it, she goes, I intended it for it to be that way because I didn't want my seller to be responsible for paying any extra fees. So we then had to get them to go back and negotiate how they were going to handle that, because it wasn't disclosed on the community association disclosure, but it was disclosed in the seller disclosure forms. So they did disclose there was an HOA there, and they told them an estimated amount, but there was no obligation for the seller to pay anything from that because they never signed off saying they would. So the seller ended up paying to get us the letter, and then we reprorated back the transfer fee. That was the buyer's transfer fee to put the file in. The buyer saying, which was $125, and then the buyer had to pay all the other fees. The problem with it was in the seller disclosure, they disclosed $550. Well, the HOA went up to $700 this year, so the buyer ended up paying that extra funds. And then on top of that, there was a new initiation fee that had just been passed for $400 the buyer didn't know about either, that the buyer ended up paying, and it wasn't disclosed to them. So if you think that there might be a homeowners association, and I would look at other FMLS and Georgia MLS listings in those neighborhoods to see. Typically, if you have a really nice neighborhood that's well maintained, they typically have an HOA. And this one I was actually a little surprised about, because once I looked at the title and looked at the subdivision name, I realized very quickly that we'd closed quite a few things in that subdivision and knew they had an HOA, kind of common knowledge. So I would look in other FMLS and see what the HOA fees were. There was not any mention of the HOA in FMLS on that one, by the way. For whatever reason, it just didn't get put in FMLS, she said. That was an oversight by her assistant. So.
Well, and so for you guys as agents, a couple of things are key there. Number one is there is another document in the contract, like Amee said, the seller's property disclosure form. There is a question that says, is there an HOA or not? And if the seller marks yes, there is in parentheses, it says must use community association disclosure exhibit, whatever the form number is. But the other thing too is I understand a listing agent trying to save their seller a few fees by not having to pay those undisclosed buyer fees. But if it's going to fall apart at the table because the lender doesn't approve those fees, or the buyer's right on the edge of their qualification, especially now, it's not worth it for a few $100. So, trying to save your seller a few $100s up front versus several $100,000 for having the deal fall apart, you need to kind of look at that scale and figure out what's in the better interest of your client.
So there's one other thing I want to add to this. We've had several realtors pay for things out of their own monies to get this closed. The community association fees have been one of them recently, because they have had a lot to have to disclose, or things weren't disclosed, and then their buyer had to come to the closing with more money than what was anticipated or allowed by the lender's loan program. So if that happens, then somebody's got to pay it, or they may not be able to close. So I've seen realtors give up money for that. Home warranties. A lot of those, guys, please check your home warranty fees. They have went up again. Many of them have increased in price again. Please check those, because I see a lot of you putting $580, but the coverage, the basic coverage on some of those policies is $560 for the company that was listed in the contract. And then somebody has to pay the extra $60, and the buyer gets upset because they thought the seller was paying the whole thing. Please make sure that you're looking at those things. I know it's easy to get out of the habit of doing the things that you're so accustomed to because you've been sort of ostracized from closing. We are so excited to have you guys coming back to closing, because I think it just makes the process smoother and easier. Plus, I like seeing all of you. I think it makes it a lot nicer of a transaction. So let me know if you have any questions, concerns. If your clients need special accommodations, we're still doing that. I just need to know in advance so that we can schedule appropriately. I, for one, am excited to not have 2 to 3 bookings on my calendar for each closing, since we were not having to separate everybody anymore. So I'm very excited about that. Any questions for me? Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Any questions, concerns, comments, commentary? Okay, and I'm hoping to see you guys next month. The order right now for 25 or more is July 13th. We will probably know by the end of June what the new order will look like. I expect that they're going to do it 50 to 100 again to keep mass crowds from gathering, but we will see what they do then. It's going to have to be something that's pretty contemplative because they're going to have to then also look at school starting back, those that are starting back August 1. I know many of you have not heard from your school districts as to when they're going to start back and are hearing a lot of things. On a side note, we've been told that there are 3 possibilities for Cobb and Paulding. One would be doing block calendars where the kids go 3 days to school 1 week, 2 days the next, 3 days the week next kind of thing. The other is to start school like normal, get the teachers virtually trained during that time and hope that we don't have to come back out of school. And then the third option was to start the Tuesday after Labor Day in the hopes that they can get the teachers properly trained in August for virtual learning in the event we have to go back to that. So I'm just giving you what they're telling us and what I'm hearing from principals and school board people and all of that right now. Some of the counties are saying they're not discussing it yet, but I can assure you they are discussing it with the state school board because there's a lot of conversation going on with that right now. So if you have any questions for me, concerns, and commentary, I'm happy to take it. Feel free to email me or call me. And if you don't have any questions for me, then I'm done.
Thank you, Amee. You're awesome as always.
Thank you.
Okay, Jay, what do you have for us today?
Oh, nothing's really going on in the mortgage business. Business as usual. Yeah. No, we all know that's not true. It's good to see everybody. Hope everybody's staying healthy and staying busy. Couple things. So actually lots of things. I'm actually getting emails with stuff that's changing or things we're updating as I'm sitting in this meeting. I just registered for our company's doing a town hall meeting. They called one for tomorrow based off guidance that we just received. So I'm trying to read through that as I was listening to Amee. But to kind of explain what we're dealing with and why you need to hug and kiss your loan officers, Dana, if you'll give me the host, I'll share a couple of things with you just to show you what we're dealing with. There we go. So this right here, guys, this is our matrix of every change that we've had since COVID, coronavirus, March, 10th or so happened. Okay. These are lender letters, guidelines, stuff from VA, stuff from the IRS, all kinds of stuff. So this is the mortgage world we live in right now.
Yay, you're not sharing your screen.
Oh, hey, you know what? How about that? Can you see
There
that
we
now?
go. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this is where we're keeping an aggregated guideline updates for everything that's happening and changing. And if you look at these dates scrolling by, this is stuff that happened in April, May, June, just all kinds of guidelines and rules. The one I get a lot of questions about that I want to focus on real quickly and kind of explain how the mortgage business works is we'll go through a Cliff Notes version of this. We're finally starting to get some guidelines from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac regarding borrowers who are in a approved forbearance for their mortgage with the forbearance program. And what we're basically what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac has said is that if the borrower hasn't missed any payments, like they were eligible for forbearance, they took a forbearance and they didn't miss any payments before that, then they are actively eligible for a mortgage now. And then there's other rules about, okay, if they missed some payments when they started up the forbearance and now they've reinstated it, we can potentially do that loan. If they miss payments and they're trying to do like a loss mitigation where they're making extra payments to catch up the missed payments as part of the forbearance, then we need 3 months of payment history. But so we do at least have some guidance now, and we have some answers for people when it comes to conventional loans with people that are doing forbearance. The challenge that we have, just so you can kind of understand how the mortgage business works, is that Fannie Mae, they released this guidance like a couple weeks ago. Okay, just because they release it, that doesn't mean that's the rule. That's what Fannie Mae is saying. That's what they're looking to purchase. That's their new guidelines. However, you have other big aggregators, say like Wells Fargo, that they purchase Fannie Mae eligible loans, but they may look at the guidelines and say, you know what, we don't like that rule. We don't want to purchase any loans that fall under a specific category. They might say we want to see 6 months of payments on time or something like that. And if you have big banks that make our mortgages liquid, they make our product or what we generate something that we can sell to other banks. If you have people stepping out of the market, that either one makes the mortgage more expensive, or number two means lenders will just bow out entirely and they won't do that loan at all. So just be aware if you see news come across your Facebook feed or housingwire.com or things like that, yes, guidelines may get updated or they may change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get adopted industry-wide, even if you see an announcement from Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So just be aware of that. A couple things real quick. So the Georgia Dream, the hardest hit fund, $15,000, goes away June 30th. The loan has to be registered. It doesn't mean it has to close, but it does have to be registered on or before June 30th, which means basically we need a contract in a couple days to get the customer locked into that program. Also, if you have buyers that are trying to do that, be sure that they know if they get a home under contract on June 22nd and we're trying to go Georgia Dream and we register it and then they have a problem with their inspection and they don't want to buy, that's fine, but they're probably bowing out of Georgia Dream entirely because the registration sticks with the property address, not with the actual customer. Okay. Couple things coming out on our economic calendar. Let me see if I can share this screen real quick. Friday is the jobs report. So we get unemployment data. There, I'm learning how to share. Bam. This is our unemployment rate going back years and years and years and years, and it was coming down, and then boom, right? Coronavirus. We're at 14.7% unemployment as of the last report. Industry consensus is that we're going to be at about 20%, 19.7% unemployment with the report that comes out on Friday. I mean, we know this is affecting our economy. I don't think we've seen the full effect of it yet. With that said, buried in this report, guys, just so you know, to try to give you some good news, and I've actually got a couple slides here in a minute I think are going to be real good news. If you look at the data, even though unemployment rate is high and there's a bunch of jobs lost, and this is going to sound harsh or cruel, and I don't mean it to, but it's just the truth when you look at it. Buried in that data, it said average wages are actually up. Wages are up 5 to 10%. And you say, well, how does that happen? How are people making more money? You know, if more people are looking for jobs or looking for work, then the cost of wages should go down. What's happening is the majority of people that are losing their jobs, unfortunately, are typically your lower wage earners, your, people that make, minimum wage or close to minimum wage. It's your lower wage earners. Those were the first jobs that are cut. And if you think about it, those are jobs that you probably can't do from home most of the time. What we're seeing is that most people who have, jobs that pay, a little bit higher income and things like that, well, those are the people that are still working. So your average wages are actually going up, even though people are losing jobs. So a lot of the people that are losing jobs, in all frankness, are people who probably weren't looking to or couldn't buy a house anyway. Obviously, some of them can, and there's certainly people that have fallen out of the market. But with that said, there's still plenty of people working that have jobs that support being able to get mortgages and being able to purchase houses. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The other thing that I wanted to point out, and I think we all can agree that this is going to be something that will apply. This is actually from a presentation about millennials and housing demand and stuff like that. And if you can see these charts on your screen right now, we know this, just if you think about it, this is true. The average age where people are getting married over the last several decades has gone up and up and up. Millennials are obviously who we're talking about here. They're known for getting married later in life and having children later in life, right? And you got to think your oldest millennials right now are about 39. These people, roughly born 1980 or after. And if you look at demographic data over time, and let me make sure this switches. Do y'all see a new chart now, bar graphs? Maybe shake a head, good, okay. So if you look at what actually drives people purchasing a single family home, it's not age. We always thought, oh, you get old enough, you go buy a home. Well, most millennials, most people that are living at home or live alone, they don't live in a house that they own. They live in an apartment or something like that. They live with somebody, they have roommates. 38% of people living alone purchase a house. Once these millennials get married and have a child, and really a child is what drives home ownership, because the numbers don't really change for living alone versus married. Married couples still will live in the same apartment and do stuff like that. But as soon as they get pregnant and have children, the amount of home ownership goes from 38% to 80%. It over doubles when someone has a child. And I don't know about you, but I'm thinking that everything with quarantine and coronavirus is probably going to lead to more children and maybe a population boom in the next, that will probably 13 years from now talk about our quarantiners and what they're doing. So, and then if you look at just raw data, if you look at Google searches, this Google search term for baby registry, what this is this is an index. So a 50 would be like even, it's not really going up, it's not really going down, it's just staying even. The search term for baby registry has skyrocketed the last 2 years, and it continues that trend to this day. If I were a real estate agent, and I'm not, but if I were a real estate agent, I would probably set up a Google AdWord or like a Facebook ad or something like that, marketing to people who are searching for baby registry, wedding registry, things like that. I just think that's where a big driver of home demand and home purchasing is going to be. And obviously, we probably see that if you think about it in our marketplace. These are typically your first-time home buyers that are buying your, 150, 200, maybe 225 purchase price houses. And we all know those homes don't stay on the market for more than about 5 minutes, right? So, like I said, I think it's a very exciting time to be in our business, to be in real estate. In spite of coronavirus, we're projecting lots of demand moving forward. And then the last thing I want to point out, and I think if you think about it, it's just the perfect storm here. Let me see if I can get to this screen. There we go. Sorry, guys, I'm still learning Zoom as well. There we go. All right, so this is you've probably seen this before last month. This is our market for interest rates and mortgage bonds. All these crazy candles back here was all the volatility and just insanity when we were trying to figure out what coronavirus was and what quarantine was and what are we going to do. And things have really flattened out and become real stable real nicely over the past month or so. And actually, these movements are pretty big movements. It's just that they're dwarfed by these huge movements that we had middle March. So if we take that out of the chart here, you can see that even if we get rid of these big candles, we're still pretty flat. Interest rates, so the higher the candle, the lower the rate. So when we're up here, we're talking about, right now in today's market, we're probably, 3.25%, maybe 3% on an FHA loan today. When we're down here, when the market goes down, we're closer to like 3.5. But you got to think, we're in a market where we have lots of pent up demand, okay? And we've got really low interest rates that make houses more and more affordable. And then you have, because housing prices have been propped up with good demand and low inventory, most people that are in a house usually have pretty good equity. Because of all that, even in spite of the unemployment rate and the economic unrest, we're really not predicting a whole bunch of massive increases in short sales or foreclosures or things like that, because people aren't going to foreclose if they have equity. They're just going to sell their house and cash out for what they can cash out for. Makes sense? So I would just, be aware of this. Encourage your people that are on the fence. Look, we're coming into the summer. People are getting out of their houses. We expect it to rise. We expect more people to look to purchase a home that maybe weren't, now that they've got a kid on the way that they weren't necessarily planning on, maybe need to move up and find a bigger house, a few more bedrooms, whatever the case may be. So my encouragement to you today from a sales standpoint is just to go kill it. I mean, go make something happen. Rates are phenomenally low. Everybody you talk to, even if they don't want to purchase, they probably need to talk to somebody about a refinance. And if you recommend that to them, then you become the expert for when they decide to purchase, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So
Jay,
just know that we see a lot of different stuff.
Can I throw one thing in on there about the foreclosures? Sure. Guys, please remember that we have not had foreclosures happen in the state of Georgia in 2 months. Today is the first day for call outs for foreclosures. Next month, you're going to see a dramatic increase in foreclosures because of foreclosures that were already in play that were not called out. What you're going to hear probably in the media is, oh my gosh, everybody's losing their homes. These were already in the works. And in talking to the foreclosure attorneys that I am familiar with or friendly with or whatever, one of the big things that they're imploring us to kind of get the information out about is they are going to be doing foreclosures in order of defaults. So if they're not in process yet for foreclosure, and that's going to come months down the road, that's not going to come in your June, your July, or your August foreclosures. They're just trying to get everything called out that was not able to be called out in April and May. So imagine the sort of debacle they've been in not being able to call out the already pending foreclosures. So please educate your buyers on that this is not, the bottom is falling out of the market. The housing market's going through another 2007, 2008 crisis. That's not what this is. This is just them trying to clean out what was already in process from January, February, March that didn't get called out. So I hope that kind of alleviates some of the fear that you're about to see with the really large numbers of foreclosures you're about to see, simply because they weren't done previously.
Yeah, you're gonna have some pin-up activity that comes to light in the next couple of weeks. But and you have to remember too that, you know, I think a lot of people are totally expecting, they think that recession goes in line with cheap home prices for what we saw back in 2008.
Yes.
And remember, I showed that chart last meeting. I don't have that one set up. I could probably find it, but you know, historically, recessions do not affect housing prices. The most recent one, other than the one we're in right now, and again, anyone who thinks we're not in a recession is kind of, you know, fooling themselves. We'll get GDP numbers here shortly that'll prove that. But the previous one, the housing market, and more specifically, you know, blame it on the loan officers, the mortgage market and Wall Street is what caused that recession. And absolutely, housing prices were, you know, inflated and housing prices came down. I'm just not seeing it in the market. I'm not seeing it in the data, either local or nationally. We just had, you know, we got through another quarter, and this is our, since 2011, it's the 25th straight quarter of home prices increasing quarter over quarter. Again, if we see a stall or a holdup or a slight downtick in prices, I think it's going to be on your really high-end homes. For someone that maybe they did lose their job and they just have to sell, they have to get rid of their, you know, $400,000 or $500,000 home or whatever it is. But generally speaking, I would encourage you to inform your clients that, look, if you're holding out for that 70s brick ranch to sell for 30 grand again, you're probably going to be waiting a little bit longer than the next year or two. I just don't see that in the data. And I'm encouraging people to say, look, you know, your savings right now are in the fact that the government's buying down your interest rate. The government's buying up all these mortgage bonds. It's causing rates to be very, very low. And that's where money can be made, or where you can have a competitive advantage over someone that buys next year or 2 years from now, when they're talking 4.5% or 5% or maybe 6% interest rates versus the rates in the 3s or the 15-year rates in the low 2s that are available. So anyway, guys, that's all I have. Any questions or anything we can cover while we're here, all here together? I don't see anybody talking. Everybody's muted, so we have to do it based off visual cues here.
Great information, both Amee and Jay. You guys, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. You can ask it in the chat too, but you can unmute yourself to interact or ask Jay or Amee anything.
I have a question. Hey, Jay. It's Brenda. When
Yes. Hey.
I thought with the forbearance, they're given 180 days, and then they're going to give another 180 days, and then it's going to come due. Is that right?
So that part of the problem, to be honest with you, it hasn't been attacked yet. And I don't think it will until more things come out of forbearance. Mm-hmm. But long story short, everybody fully expects that the government, working with the servicers somehow, some way, we're going to figure out a way to roll those payments to the end of the loan. Okay, so a customer that skips 6 payments, if they were going to pay their house off in January of 2032, now they're going to pay their house off in, July of 2032. None of that is specifically set up yet. And the way forbearance works right now today, based off the loan agreements and the things that are in place, is that yes, when it comes out of forbearance, everything's all due at the same time. And nothing about that has changed yet. We're still not encouraging people to go into forbearance. And you got to think from just a prudent underwriting standpoint. If someone says, hey, I can't make my mortgage payment. I need to go into forbearance. And then they come to me a month later and want to apply for a loan to buy a new house. We obviously are going to have some questions, right? It's like, well, what has happened? And okay, I'm back to work now. Okay, great. Take your loan out of forbearance and let's go ahead and process this. And now we at least have some guidance from Fannie Mae that we can do that as a conventional loan. We don't technically have that guidance yet from FHA. So right now, I would say conventional is more aggressive with these customers than FHA is. Hopefully we'll get some guidance. Again, this stuff changes daily. The other thing to remember though, guys, and I didn't mention this earlier, I meant to, is that again, just because Fannie Mae says it, well, like we said, you've got other aggregators, your Wells Fargo's and Bank of America's of the world, that we want to see where they fall in line. The other thing we have though, is we have mortgage insurance companies, right? Radian, United Guarantee, people like that. And Fannie Mae specifically said it's up to the lender to make sure the loan has mortgage insurance. So even though Fannie Mae will allow for these, loans to come out of forbearance, if the customer is not putting 20% down, if they're only putting 3 or 5% down, and the mortgage insurance companies are worried about that and they don't want that extra risk, well, then if we can't get mortgage insurance on the loan, we still don't have a loan unless they can scare up a bigger down payment where it's not required. Because remember, that's done by a separate company. So we are still nowhere near out of the woods. We are nowhere near being at a place where we say, okay, here's the rules, here's how it applies, you can bank on this, move forward. We're not there yet. We're finally starting to see a little bit more guidance. We're starting to see how this shakes out. And to be honest with you, no one wants to be the first one to go. A mortgage insurance company, they're not going to step up and say, whatever Fannie Mae comes up with, we're going to approve and we'll insure it. They want to see what Fannie Mae had to say. And Fannie Mae doesn't want to release a guideline that the mortgage insurance companies aren't going to get on board with, because that doesn't help anyone if we can't get PMI on these loans. So again, there's back and forth. It takes time. The good news is that overall, the mortgage market has been relatively stable for the last 30 days, and it's given people time to work on some of these questions that we've all had from day one. But to say that we've got definite answers to it, or say, a customer who's in forbearance, they pick up the phone and call and wants to know exactly what they need to do, no one can give them that information. And if they say they can, they're making stuff up. There's just too much changing. There's no way to know.
How about the property taxes that they would take out in escrow? How's the forbearance and the property taxes? How's that working out?
Well, I mean, we all know there's nothing, true in life or, definitive in life except what death and taxes. So I'm sure they're going to get this money from the customer somehow, some way. But yes, the customer is absolutely responsible for their property taxes. In fact, that's one of the things the servicing lenders were complaining about with forbearance. They're like, guys, we're not just missing out on mortgage interest that we've got to make our investors whole on. We're not going to allow these properties that are collateral for these loans to have property tax liens. So we have to pay that, but they're fronting that money up front, and they're going to have to get repaid if they're going to become whole in that loan. So no, again, whatever it is, whether it's forbearance, whether it's this extra unemployment benefit, whether it's these government checks people are getting for $1,200 or $1,500 or $1,800 or whatever backward math you have to do, people need to know somehow, some way, there is no such thing as a free lunch. If you paid attention years ago, back in the 08 recession, when they sent out a bunch of checks to people, I did taxes for people back then. It was just something I did on the side, mainly for family members. And I noticed real quick that when you put in the fact that they received a check from the government for that $800, whatever they got, their refund went down $800. So it really wasn't free money. They were just forwarding them or fronting them some of their refund that they would have gotten had they just waited and filed their taxes later. So I think most people that are weary or maybe a little bit distrusting know that that's the case most of the time. Certainly it applies to forbearance or really anything else that the government's doing or quote unquote handing out. So just know that and advise people accordingly. Look, if you can make your payment, if you can get by without that money, if you can work and you're busy and you can do this stuff, great. And by the way, now's a great time to buy a house. Rates are low and we're expecting prices to keep going up. That would absolutely be my pitch for everything, but they're going to get that property tax money back.
How about insurance? You know, when they take out for insurance too.
Oh, they're going to get that back too. Again, they're not going to allow the house to be uninsured. What if the house burns down? Now they don't have collateral if it's not insured. So, you know, all of it, the whole payment gets deferred, and the whole payment will have to get paid back somehow, some way over time.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much. Tons of information, a lot of information, a lot to absorb. I just want to, Brenda and Jeanne, I was just going to talk a little bit about some of the classes we've got coming up and just some things in general. We are still playing it by ear. We were going to have some in-branch meetings, and we actually published them that way, and we're not getting the turnout. So we're having the CE classes are still all virtual this month. We're going to wait and see what happens in July. Please check out the June calendar. I sent out the big monthly CE email yesterday. If you did not get it, if you will let me know, staff is having some email issues. A lot of our staff emails are going to spam or not going out. We're having problems with our email server. It's not GoDaddy, it's another server, but I think we're going to change. So I'm not getting the response that I typically get from sending out that mass email about our CE classes that we send out to the entire GREC mailing list. So I have a feeling that might be something tied into my email address. But please check out the calendar. This Thursday, I'm teaching license law. We've got a LinkedIn class on Thursday. We've got a class on Friday about determining market value. You guys, this is a great opportunity for y'all to take classes that you wouldn't normally take because they are hosted by an instructor or another Maximum One franchise that isn't geographically close to you, but they teach different classes than we teach through the Greater Atlanta offices. So there's an Instagram class. Jay or Wes, we're not sure yet, is teaching an FHA class next Wednesday at 9:30, virtual FHA financing 101. 101 changes to 1001 daily, as Jay just mentioned. So even if you feel pretty comfortable with FHA, that might be a great class to take. I'm trying to look at, we've got a relatively new class next Tuesday on the 9th, mobile apps, virtual tools, and digital marketing. That's a new class. Anyway, just a lot of classes. If you guys will take a look at the calendar, they're all virtual right now. I believe, and Brenda and Jeanne, you'll have to confirm, I believe we're going to skip our meeting in West Cobb for July. We'll reconvene in August. We're going to hope to have it in branch, but we'll kind of check it out and see what's going on there. Oh, something else I was going to say about the classes. You guys dive in, just dive in and talk to your clients. There is a ton of opportunity out there, and there are people that still need to buy and sell for a variety of reasons. The other thing that's really interesting, they used to have a huge wedding trade show at Galleria, and back 20 some odd years ago when I first got my license, I paid for a booth at that trade show, and I got a ton of business by just making contacts with people that were getting ready to get married. So that was kind of an interesting way to go about getting those wedding people. Also, I just found out my husband and I have a friend whose daughter is getting married, and she has a wedding registry on Amazon. So that's pretty cool. I wasn't aware of that. So that was kind of interesting. But Jay, that was really fabulous, really interesting statistics about not age like it used to be. It used to be you grew up, you wanted to move out of your parents' house. Now you stay in your parents' house for as long as you can until you have a baby. And then now we're seeing even a lot of babies going back to moving back to parents. But that was just a really interesting change in statistics. In general, there is still very volatile issues in the world right now that is affecting the entire country. And as we talked about last month, I just caution each and every one of you to be very cautious in expressing your opinion. I'm not telling you to not have an opinion. I'm just telling you to be cautious about expressing your opinion in a professional manner, because you could you could dismiss professional opportunity that you may otherwise get. Even if you're having a conversation with somebody one-on-one and somebody potentially overhears you. Again, I'm not trying to censor you. I'm not telling you any of that. I'm just saying be aware that there is extreme volatility and very, very heated emotions and very strong opinions, with short tempers, due to being cooped up, and just a lot of issues right now. So just bear that in mind in your interactions, and just be aware that even in your interactions with somebody in the office, especially if you are in the branch or in a real estate related situation showing property, of who's around you in a professional manner. Seems like there was something else I was going to say. There is a ton of information on Facebook, on the Rockstars group on Facebook. So that is a wonderful thing for you guys to look at, even just to glance through. If you don't have an issue now, as a broker, I have found once one of y'all has an issue, more of you have that exact same issue. So it's just an interesting thing to just take a look at the Rockstars page, even if you don't have a specific issue going on right now, just so you're aware of the conversation that's going on. And there is a search function on there that you can go back and search for answers. Also, I'm finding in the support email, we're getting a lot of questions that I've done videos on in the past. I don't mind answering them, but my videos are pretty far in depth, more than I'm going to type up in an email answer on support. Any questions for me regarding Maximum One, or anything else going on regarding any of that? Nope. Anybody have anything? Yes.
I just said thanks. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Also, I do definitely want to encourage you guys to please be extra vigilant with your contracts right now. We're having a lot of issues where your contracts are incomplete for whatever reason, and they're having issues. Like, for example, I don't know if it came across support or just came to me. There's an agent representing a sale or lease contingency. They're under contract, got another offer, and just completely got amnesia about how to proceed with that. And I will caution you guys in general, agent to agent email, attorney to agent email, that does not satisfy the terms of notice for the contract. So for example, with the sale or lease contingency, it stated that in order for the seller to accept the offer from buyer number 2 to exercise the kickout, they had to send notice to buyer number 1 to give them the 48 or 72 hours, whatever time frame they had negotiated. Well, our agent representing the seller said, well, I sent the other agent email. That does not satisfy the terms of notice. The seller you need to pull out that notice form. I believe it's form 8F816 in GAR. You have to put, we are hereby notifying you that we are exercising the kickout per sale or lease contingency exhibit A or B or whatever. Signed by the seller, send that to the other agent. That is what starts the clock ticking. Agent to agent email has no bearing on the contract. We have another issue right now where we're scheduled to close today, and we've got a buyer. They're binding under a GAR purchase and sale agreement, and the buyer has switched from a conventional loan to a FHA loan. In the GAR contract this year, it specifically states that you must get the seller's written permission in order for that buyer to go through and pay for the deal with an FHA loan. and they sent it to the seller, and the seller did not sign the amendment to approve a buyer's FHA loan. So the buyers, the loan under which they're approved, the seller did not agree to because of additional fees and so forth and so on. And the seller has some title issues. There's a cloud on title that can easily be cleared up, but it's a divorce situation. And so one spouse wants money from the other spouse to sign the document required to clear up this cloud on title. There's two clouds on title. So the issue is the buyer's agent did send the amendment for the buyer to change to an FHA loan. So that never got signed, but nevertheless, the buyer did do what they were required to do. The title issue, again, this is just information from the attorney by email to both agents, and they've discussed it between the buyer and the seller. But per the contract, it says the buyer is entitled to examine the title, and if they find an issue, they must send notice to the seller of the title issue to give the seller time to cure. Well, the buyer has not sent formal notice. So if the buyer doesn't send notice and it fails to close, the buyer is going to be in default for switching to FHA loan, and the seller didn't agree to it. However, if the buyer does send the notice of the title objection, then that satisfies the terms of the contract. And then if it doesn't close, we've got a mutual default, and the buyer will get their earnest money back. So anytime the contract says notice or notification or notify, please remember that is not agent to agent email. That has to be done in writing and signed by either the buyer or the seller. And again, I think it's form F816. I don't remember for sure. But in the GAR contract package and in the RE forms contract package, there is a general form called notice, and that will be your best friend. That is probably one of the most important, least often used form for your contracts. That's all I have. Brenda, Jeanine, anything for you guys?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I guess I was off the whole time. I'm sorry if you could hear lawnmowers going in the background. That would be me. Thank you all for coming. Does anybody have anything they want to say, that's muted right now about your business, concerns, anything other than what we've discussed?
I am trying to send a chat to Dana, but it's not allowing it, Miss Dana. That information you requested?
Is this Hortensia talking?
Yes.
I just sent you an email, so you can just send it to me by email.
Okay.
Okay, and just real quickly, Tesh, I can tell she's listening. She has an awesome accountability group that I've missed the past couple, but the one it's spectacular. So if you're looking for ways to grow your business, she really it's something really to look into joining. So shoot her an email if you're not a part of that group, and I'm sure she'll add you to it.
Tesh, do you have Tesh was going to consider having meetings this month. Did you figure out anything, Tesh? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Jeanine, for informing everyone of the group. Dana, to answer your question, when you sent the email, that was after our group had ended, the last group. So what I had planned to do is pose a census this Friday. We're having another meeting. We're having meetings weekly now. We had initially started having it twice a month. Now we're having it weekly because we are setting up our social media sites and, posting, going over the tutorials. So attendees want to do it every week. So to answer your question, I'm going to post that question at our next meeting, and then I'll have the answer for you by Saturday.
So how are you having your meetings now?
Via Zoom.
So if you just send me that information, just leave it that way and I'll put it on the calendar. So
awesome.
Yeah, send me
Will do.
the date and the Zoom link and I'll add that to the calendar.
That sounds great. We'll
Perfect.
do.
And
Thank
then don't
you.
change anything. Just don't even ask them. Just don't change anything for June. The majority of people are still more comfortable at home right now, especially with everything else that's going on. So I think let's just leave them virtual for June. Just send me the dates and the links and I'll get them on the calendar. And then everybody that's on this meeting, you are more than welcome to join virtually the Tesha's accountability group. And I know just wonderful things from your agents that are attending that group in terms of productivity and interacting with potential customers and clients.
Also, we have a Facebook page called the Accountability Mastermind Group. If anyone wants to be a part of that group, after every meeting, we always post content from the actual meeting. It's very informative content. So if you're interested, I can definitely get you, I will send you an invitation to join. I'll put my information in the chat. Thank you, Dana and Jeanne.
Send me the link to that Facebook page too, and I can put that on the calendar. That's really just our calendar, because you would still have to approve anyone joining that group. Just like for you guys the Rockstars group, it is a quote unquote closed group. It's just Maximum One agents and our Maximum One affiliated lenders and attorneys. It's not an open Facebook page, so that other co-op agents and agents from other companies aren't seeing anything on that Rockstars page.
Oh, got it. Will do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. And remember, July, we will not be meeting. And then I may or may not see you in August because I'm going to be a Nini. I'm going to be a grandma. So she's due at the end of July. So I don't know if I'll be a part of.
So does that mean they're going to start looking for a house to buy?
They bought, they're in Virginia Beach. They don't live here. So I have to travel there, but they bought in Virginia Beach. So
there you go, Jay. Fits with Jay's statistics.
Okay. Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you. And thank you and Brenda and Becky. Becky's mother is having some issues. Thank you guys, as always, for just organizing the great meetings as usual.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.